Hi folks, so I'm on my way downtown to live stream the She Does event about homeless women on the street here in Los Angeles. But right now I wanted to make some remarks about Syria because apparently the strikes are over. All the protests are about the continued bombing of Syria. It was a very limited bombing operation. It's over. Apparently there were no casualties. And if you listen to the Russians, they intercepted something like 71 of the 120 missiles. So apparently the thing was a failure. But as somebody posted on my Facebook page earlier, it wasn't a failure for the weapons manufacturers because they still sold those missiles and they still made their money for those missiles, whether they hit the targets or not. And after all, that's what it's all about. There are a lot of people talking about, all the outrage on the street. Quite frankly, I don't think there's a lot of outrage on the streets because we don't have a draft in this country. And I'm old enough to remember the Vietnam War protests. I was just a child, but we had a draft then, and that's why there was mass resistance to the war. Right now, it's just the poorest among us that are fighting these wars, and the vast majority of American people could give a shit. So we're seeing everybody talking about we need a mass mobilization against war. I don't think we're going to see a mass mobilization against war because most people are not, losing loved ones in the wars. And they don't understand how the money that we spent on war and weapons takes away from money that could be spent on social programs, housing, health care, education, jobs, fixing our aging infrastructure, etc., etc. So that's the thing. We need to have an anti-war movement in this country, but we really aren't going to have one until more people start making these connections. And with the kind of education system that we have right now, I was shocked. I was right down here, almost right where I am right now on Spring Street and 6th Street a few weeks ago at the March for Our Lives, and Pat Harris, who's running for Senate against Dianne Feinstein, we were interviewing some students. And there were two very bright students from Fairfax High School that we interviewed, and they did not even know what the Senate was. There are efforts to register students to vote and to identify which politicians take money from the NRA, and conversations about voting them out in the next election.
In school, do you mean? Oh, not really. I don't think I've... Well, yeah, we did pre-register to vote, but, I feel like they don't teach us enough about politics. I don't really know, what each position does or what they mean or what they do for their city or the state, or, I don't really know about... I know of politics, but I don't know about politics. They don't teach us enough about, what's actually going on, if that makes sense. Yeah,
that totally makes sense. In my day, we used to have civics education in school, and they would talk about every level of government and what it did. And now it seems to me that the only place you can learn about government in school is if you happen to be in AP government.
Probably.
Yeah.
I'm not in AP government, so I wouldn't know. And I know we did pre-register to vote, but personally, I don't know about, Senate, right? That's just running for. I don't know what that means.
Senate?
Yeah. I don't know exactly what they do, and, if they're in charge of the country or the city or the state.
Senate. It's like she hadn't even heard the word Senate to know that it was even pronounced right, much less know that our senators were Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris. So they're not teaching civics in school anymore. The only way that you'll know about government is if you happen to take an AP government class in 11th or 12th grade, and not everybody takes that class. So without even knowing how our American government works, how can we possibly expect people to fulfill their roles as citizens in a democracy? But as we know, we don't have a democracy. We have an oligarchy. The Princeton study showed that, because the vast majority of the people are not the ones influencing how government is run. It's the wealthy. It's the billionaires and the millionaires and the corporations. So that's what we have to address. I think the education system is something that isn't discussed enough. Not only that, you know, what parents have to do, but parents are too busy working 2 or 3 jobs trying to feed their family. You know, the days of having the dinner time conversation. I'm old enough to remember that we used to sit in the dining room and have dinner with my mother and father and my sister, and we used to discuss the issues of the day. Forget about that. Those days are gone. I mean, you're lucky if you even have 2 parents. I think I read 46% of Americans are living alone. It's the highest percentage of Americans living alone ever. And people, you know, that do have marriages, it's probably both parents are working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. So forget having the family dinner where the family sits around and talks about the issues of the day. I mean, that's like Leave It for Beaver, Leave It to Beaver or whatever. I'm actually not that old. I think that show was in the 50s or something like that. But this Syria thing is ridiculous. The bombing is over. It served its purpose. Basically, the deep state goaded Trump into doing it because, as we all remember, 2 weeks ago, he tweeted that we are getting out of Syria. And then the next thing you know, you have this false flag operation where Saddam is once again gassing his own people. And the first 2 incidents that caused us to go into the war back in 2013, and then the one exactly a year ago, were proven false, that Saddam did not do it, and that they weren't even from the air. Theodore Postal proved that. It was actually like a pipe bomb that was planted on the ground, and it was done by the rebels, okay? And the rebels have the sarin gas, so it's not just the Assad government that has the sarin gas. And why would Assad do this now when he's about to win the war against ISIS? And by the way, Assad and Russia are the only ones successfully fighting ISIS, and they would have dispatched them in due course had we not gotten into this war 4 years ago. So what happened after this supposed gas attack? That, by the way, the only people that talked about this was the white helmets. And the white helmets, as I have reported based on Max Blumenthal's reporting, is part of the al-Nusra Front, which is the moderate rebels that we're supporting. That is actually an outgrowth of al-Qaeda, by the way. And so they're the only ones that reported it. And the Organization for Chemical Weapons, whatever that organization is called, they were on their way to do an inspection and a report, and then, of course, Trump did his little bombing. So for people that are blaming Trump, you know, Obama was bombing civilians. He was drone striking civilians. He met every week in the kill room to discuss who the targets were going to be, extrajudicial killings. And now Ted Lieu and all the Democrats are so upset about Trump not using the War Powers Authority to go and ask for the authority to do this bombing, and they're so concerned. But where were they when Obama was drone striking civilians? And by the way, they were civilians because they changed the definition of this is how Orwellian it is. A military combatant, by the way, is any adult male over the age of 18 who is in the vicinity of a suspected terrorist. So then they weren't civilians anymore, they were militant combatants. And that's how they got away with saying that they weren't bombing civilians, but they were, okay? So why wasn't everybody marching in the streets about Obama with the drone strikes? Why isn't everybody marching in the streets about Saudi Arabia, who have been bombing Yemen for 2 years right now? Talk about war crimes. And we have been giving them the weapons and the money to do so. And Ted Lieu, who is my congressman, he disgusts me now because all he ever does is go on Twitter and cable news and talk about Trump and Russia, Trump and Mueller, Trump, 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 Trump. He was the one who 2 years ago actually had a bill to say we should not be giving Saudi Arabia any money as long as they were committing war crimes in Yemen. And he did not even come out publicly and say anything about Bernie Sanders and Mike Lee's bill about the same subject, which was a few weeks ago. So Ted Lieu has completely abrogated his responsibility as our congressman to do anything substantive about the issues that affect the American people, because he is grandstanding, just like Rachel Maddow, who is now the #1 anchor in America, the #1 anchor. She devotes 60 minutes of her program every night to Russia, Trump, Mueller, etc., etc. She's not talking about any other subject, and that's because she is getting ratings for MSNBC, which is owned by Comcast. She gets paid $7 million a year by Comcast. She is worth $20 million. So this host from Air America, who is the progressive radio network that we were all in love with, 10, 20 years ago, whenever she started with Air America, she is completely sold out. That's why I call her McCarthyite Maddow, because she has fomented a new Cold War against Russia, who we should be getting along with. Russia is a second-rate power. Their GDP is less than Spain, and Putin has a lot more sense than Trump or any of the Democrats in power right now. And I am just disgusted. I'm sorry if I'm raising my voice about this, but I'm just irate that we've got marches all over the country about this war. First of all, it's not a war. It was a precision strike. It's done. There are no casualties. And if you believe Russia, they intercepted 71 of the 120 missiles that were sent. And as I said, the weapons manufacturers still got their money, and that's all that counts. So I'm signing off right now because I have to pay for my parking space here. But in a short while, I will be resuming my live stream from the She Does camp out at City Hall here in Los Angeles.